America, land of the free, from Florida to Alaska. But freedom comes with responsibility. We at Hazelwood Oil are doing our duty to help clean up the environment. With chlorofluorocarbons in the air, the ozone depleting, factory runoff, and unavoidable accidental oil spills, there's a lot we can all pitch in on. Hazelwood Oil is doing our part to reverse the damage. Are you?
Satan wants your soul. And if you participate in Halloween, you shall have it. This is spiritual warfare. The streets are the battlefields. Be soldiers of Christ. Stop your neighbors from celebrating Halloween. Save their souls. Save yours.
You are listening to Fruitless, a podcast hosted by me, Josiah Sutton. That's been missing for a few weeks, but we're back, and we're going to spam your feed with a bunch of episodes. This is episode 17, WNUF Halloween Special, featuring Spike Stonehand, where we talk about WNUF Halloween Special and what makes a found footage movie good. Hope you enjoy. Well, welcome everybody to Fruitless. I am joined today by Spike Stonehand, or Steven. Hello, Steven.
Yo, how are you today?
I am pretty good. This is, as I mentioned off mic, this is probably the latest I've started recording a Fruitless episode in a minute. And so I'm excited to see, like, as I get more tired, how that's going to go.
Right. I think it's a fitting theme for the discussion today.
I think so. It has a kind of like, like the kind of like weird TV you see and you're kind of tired and it's like midnight. Yeah.
Yeah. What was that? What product is even being advertised to me right now? I don't know who is paying for this 3 a.m. commercial, but it feels very targeted, this advertisement.
So real quick, I asked you to come on and actually be the first episode here of the Fruitless kind of October, horror themed month, right? Just gonna have people come on and talk about favorite horror movies. And originally when I reached out to you, we mentioned we kicked back and forth Evil Dead, but that almost felt like too easy. I mean, Evil Dead's an amazing, perfect movie, and I think like most people have seen it, right? But WNUF's Halloween Special, I think that's a more specific cult object. And also one that you've made yourself an apologist for. So maybe tell us a little bit about
an evangelist, maybe.
Oh, an evangelist, excuse me.
So I think I first heard about it from another horror movie podcast that digs through the detritus of the horror movie landscape to try and find the few gems here and there. And I think that it's a movie that how you encounter it, I think, affects your enjoyment of the movie.
I think I can imagine. I can really see that.
I read on the Wikipedia page for the WNUF Halloween Special that the director allegedly has hidden VHS tapes across America, and I can imagine. I don't know if this is true or not, but if someone found an actual VHS of this and put it in their bought a VHS system on eBay and watched it, that would totally change how you view this movie.
So for those who don't know, WNUF Halloween Special is a found footage movie, although I will say what you're picturing a found footage movie to look like, get rid of that in your head. It doesn't quite have that feel at all. It is designed to look like just a videotaped section of TV during the late 80s where a news station is, they're kind of a public access station is having this guy come and explore a haunted house.
Right. It's so like they would, back in the day do it's like an actual special, not 60 Minutes is a prestigious version of this. This is the, local news version.
This is the local news. Yeah.
Like what do we, how can we trick people into spending an hour of their time watching the news on Halloween night instead of going to a party, hanging out with friends? Like, no, let's watch the local news go investigate a haunted house.
Well, with the charisma of the man Frank Stewart, of course, leading the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, and what a figure he is.
Truly,
that's one of the things that I really noted this viewing is so the newscaster.
He's so fucking funny.
He's he comes off as just a huge asshole the whole time. It's like just hostile to everybody he's questioning and talking to. He'll walk up to the random people that are gathered in costume for this new special, and it just talks to them like they're children or just not fully there.
Ghostbusters. Oh, very funny. Okay, sir, do you believe in ghosts?
Well, I know that there's Casper the Friendly Ghost, but
yeah. When that wasn't a real ghost. That was a fictional ghost. I'm sorry if you didn't realize that. I don't mean to burst your bubble. You, ma'am, do you believe in ghosts?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Hi. What was the question?
The question was that I've been asking everyone here for a while is, do you believe it? Try to focus here.
It's so mean. And so this was on Shudder like a year or two ago, and then it has been yanked.
Yes,
so
that's
now
how I first watched it.
Yeah, and they got a bump from that. I think they got put on Shudder because the sequel, which we're not talking about tonight, but that came out 2 years ago. So I think it got brought on on Shudder along with the sequel, and then I don't know, the various streaming rights things just yank everything. But so because of that, you and I both had to speed buy this Blu-ray to do this episode. And this is it's a great Blu-ray. If you want to watch this movie, you should just buy the Blu-ray. It's great.
It's you're buying it to support a local artist. It's
yeah.
You get some sort of value out of that too, I think.
I think so. Yeah. It when it arrived, it felt the same as I bought a few. I don't know if you're into Important Cinema Club, but Justin DeClue's label, Gold Ninja Video, and there's just such a homemade quality to the Blu-rays. It's just really nice.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, but no, this had a bunch of special features, so I tried to work through them while I was working today. And what I found, they were actually, the commentaries are really, really entertaining on this. Because there's one from
I didn't have time to check that out.
Yeah, one from 2014 with just the director Chris LaMartina, I believe is his name, and then the other one had cast and crew. But anyway, all I'm getting at with that was that the role of the newscaster, Frank Stewart, that character, played by Paul Fahrenkopf. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but Paul, he worked with Chris a bunch in the past, and they wrote the role just for him.
Okay.
And most of the funny scenes are just ad-libbed, where they did have just a crowd of people that they told to just be as insufferable as possible as audience members, and then just have him riff on them. So some of my favorite interactions from that are what the lady who said, or what she says, I believe in good ghosts.
Do you believe in ghosts?
Yeah, well, no. Yes,
Yes, well, no. Okay, go ahead.
Like friendly kinds, happy ghosts. When your grandmother passes away, but my mom told me, she would always be there, and she'll look after me. That's she's happy.
Yeah, and you believed her when she said that.
Well, I mean, I like to. I think so.
And they gave your dog away to a farm where it could be happy, right?
Oh no, I didn't have a dog.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Right.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, just and I think that the fact that all those are ad-libbed, but in a way that I don't know. Compared to other improvisational comedy, I guess this kind of more improvisational acting that happens to be funny. Mm-hmm. It adds that kind of, the verisimilitude, I guess, that you really, that's the thing that sticks out to me most about this movie is that it doesn't feel like a bunch of actors. No. Or it doesn't even feel like a bunch of people acting like they're not actors. It's I don't know how they were able to capture that compared to a lot of other, there's a lot of other found footage movies in particular that I feel like can really that's where it's so hard to describe good acting But this movie of people that you don't know their names, you probably don't know the director, but they are able to capture really well without any sense of irony or they're not. There's no one's doing the Joss Whedon like, well, that happened, kind of jokes. So the jokes are all from how sincere it is.
Yeah, and you can tell there's a degree of self-awareness, but it's in the writing, not in the delivery. And I think that makes a whole difference, right? Because I don't know, you can tell some of the I don't know, some of the commercials. I don't know if we said this, but a big chunk of it is that it's like every 10 minutes it interrupts with these commercial breaks with fake commercials that essentially Chris LaMartina they like crowdsourced among all their friends and of like comedians and actors they knew and just built these very real commercials. But some of the writing to those feels like you can tell it's self-aware. It knows how it's sounding, but it's being delivered in such a way that it looks exactly like an ad from this time. So you kind of am like, are they like, is this a joke or not? I think it playing itself so straight is part of why it works so well.
Oh, for sure. And one of the other things that I really noticed about the commercials this viewing is that as the night went on, as the hypothetical newscast that they're recording went past the prime time and into the late night, the commercials themselves changed and became more dark. You can track how the night's going based off of the don't do drugs PSAs. That it starts off in a much like you would imagine a childhood drug PSA would go, but as the night goes on, it becomes more and more, you're gonna die from sharing a needle. It just gets more and more like trying to scare you.
Yeah, and then you get as it's getting into the night portion, it's like there's like ads for strip clubs and stuff like that. Like it's like, it's totally like local TV. The later in the night, it's like, okay, this is the age appropriate stuff. Like the kids have.
We don't have to advertise the arcade and pizza anymore. Yeah, now we can tell you about astrology and.
They're really great. The one of my favorite ads is like from early on in the beginning, and actually I'm gonna stick the audio from it at the beginning of the episode because it makes me laugh so hard. It's the oil company doing the environmentalism commercial.
Right.
It's just, so subtle.
Again. Again, they play it so straight. Like the joke really only makes sense because you're a viewer watching it in the current year and not live in the 1980s. And if you were watching this fake commercial when it supposedly aired, it wouldn't have been funny. I mean, maybe if you were really plugged into the environmental scene, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only way it tips its hat is this. So the commercial is just listing like, oh, we all can do our part. There's all this fucked up stuff in the world, but we're doing our part and you do your part. And one of the things in the list of it's like the ozone layer depleting and stuff is it goes, unavoidable accident. Jesus, I can't even say it. Unavoidable accidental oil spills.
Which, man, yeah, I don't even know my oil spill history enough. Being in Texas, the oil spills are a big part of the background radiation of my life. I remember there was a unrelated to the movie side note. There was every year they have the school statewide testing questions, right? And for one of the high school math questions one year was it was like, hey, so hypothetically, if there's an oil spill that's spilling, water out oil out at this rate after this much time, how much oil has spilled out, like for a high school physics test. And literally the next year was the BP oil spill. It was like they were trying to find the key mathematicians using the state exam to, like, the last Starfighter, but for solving oil spills. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, it's really great. Yeah, so okay, it since it's a lot of it is broken up, and I feel like the first 20 minutes to a half hour, it really does just feel like you're watching the news, and you get to these kind of like early segments that introduce like the anti-Halloween protesters who are going to become important by the end. And we're going to be spoiling this movie probably by talking about it. So just a warning.
It's kind of hard to talk, yeah.
But just, I guess, a warning now. But I think it's still worth watching, even if you know it's coming. I think it still works plenty fine. But no, yeah. So it introduces these like pieces of what are going to kind of matter. There's that like dentist buyback candy program because the dentist doesn't want anyone eating candy.
Yeah. The reality of this, it's astounding to me. So we get first the dentist is offering $1 for every pound of candy.
Yeah.
And then later on he says that first visit is free if you and just watching that. I don't know if how intentional it was, but this is just one of those like, is this movie trying to make a point about healthcare? That this dentist can afford to take out TV ads and give buy one get one and candy buyback instead of a gun buyback. I'm wondering if there's some sort of obscure point here about our special teeth that are not included in our normal healthcare.
Now, so okay, like I wouldn't call this movie an exploitation movie by any means, but one thing that kind of this makes me think of an exploitation movie is what I know from what I listened to. There was not at all an attempt to make politics a focus in this movie. Like, it is not supposed to be a political movie, but exploitation movies often end up having really interesting politics because they're just kind of like a fly trap, like a sticky fly trap of culture. And because they're just like trying to include as much culture of just things around them as possible, it does kind of end up being a political object. And I think this was the same because, Chris LaMartina, he just sat down and watched like hours and hours and hours of recorded 80s TV before making this. And so, he might have just been picking up
probably the worst type of TV there is.
Honestly.
To watch.
And I think it was his grandmother or something. It just taped everything. So he had just tons of tapes of just 80s TV and was able to just watch it. And so I wonder if he's just, whether intending these political points or not, just picking it up. I mean, because it was just what was in the air in the 80s and comes out pretty apparently.
Yeah, you get a couple different rival political campaign ads, from that they're taking their jabs at each other. Like, I don't want to stoop low and mention my my opponent's affair that he had.
That's one of the best lines.
Petty little issues and this commercial that he has running. I want to talk about the issues that concern the residents of our state. But if you want to talk about these little issues, these insignificant things like his infidelity, I'm more than willing to talk about.
But my favorite part about this is that you get is that you actually kind of do get the perspective of the person recording this local TV a little bit through the what segments they choose to fast forward.
Kind of
and so you get these political ads. You get kind of like the first 10 seconds of it, and then whoever's recording this is like, no one cares about the details of this policy. Let me fast forward. Let's go make sure to watch the next commercial that's like a incredibly horny popcorn ad. Like
I love that, especially because they have a few ads that they run like multiple times throughout it, and so I think it's the carpet ad. Mm-hmm. He watches it 2 times full. And it's the 3rd time that it shows up that it fast forwards.
Well, yeah, it's so interesting too. When you think about like the idea of found footage, that the real life example of this often, that actually makes it to the movie theaters would be a documentary like Grizzly Man, right, where you really get Herzog's interpretation and selection of events and the editing here. And a lot of found footage, I feel like you kind of don't ever get the perspective of the archivist.
Oh, that's a good point.
You know what I mean? It's like who's taking all this footage and editing it together and releasing it. You kind of get that. Like with the with For Witch. Like none of the actors did any publicity appearance for months beforehand, before that movie was released, and they really tried to sell you on like, no, this is actually footage that we found and edited together. I'm the guy who edited it together, and they all do interviews, but the actors, we haven't been able to find them. I don't know. Just there's something about getting that like authorial perspective on, hey, this is the footage I found. And I'm choosing to upload or choosing to put to VHS.
I think that's a good point, because I think that's what fails with a lot of found footage, is that you're kind of like, why the fuck do they have these cameras? Like, it doesn't play any role in the actual story as like, yeah, this one has a distinct, like, I know what is happening and why it looks the way it does within the kind of, this story cannot be told a different way. The way it's being delivered in the like found footage format is like that's how it needs to be told, is with the ad breaks, and the ad breaks do add like at the very least comedic value to some stuff. Right. we didn't get this far in the movie yet, but I'll say it now. When the couple goes missing and they walk off and storm off the show, you still get the commercial break right afterwards. It's advertising their book as if they'd been on this whole time and they'd been really insightful. It actually enhances it.
Yeah.
You know what? We might as well kind of move forward with the story like a little bit. So after it kind of does that, like, local news, you get the introduction of the anti-Halloween people. Oh, you get the story of one of the darkest bits. Okay, this one feels pretty intentionally political. I don't know. Was the kid that got shot by the Vietnam vet toward the beginning? I forget about that. It's like right at the beginning.
Yeah, and then that is kind of the first interjection of darkness kind of into the proceedings. That's the first moment. We're like, that there's a Vietnam veteran who mistakes a local Asian boy for Viet Cong soldier and shoots him, and that's that's that kind of like, I think that had happened a year before, and the guy is now facing the death penalty, and it's like, all right, and then moving on to
it has the delivery of
we got a spooky movie coming for you next.
No, that totally fits the like local news vibe, like that. I even like here in Iowa, even like now news will have stuff like that where it's like, okay, here's this thing. Oh, this woman was hate crimed. And then now puppies. Yeah. Here's a segment about puppies. It's I don't know. It kind of just, it reflects the look of that kind of daytime news kind of.
Yeah, it's like the true crime, and the killer broke into her house. And if you don't want the killer to break into your house, you need to buy our bespoke alarm system. That's right. Just seamlessly segue into the advertisement. It feels very similar to that. But I guess we, in theory, hold our news media to a higher standard than true crime podcasters. But
yeah,
maybe we shouldn't. Is what the thesis of this movie.
That's one reading. Yes. Well, so I mean, actually,
they're running the controversy. They're like at their we got to show both sides here. We got to show the people that are satanic panic, trying to scare people about Halloween and the evils of it.
I mean, I don't know if this is too far fetched, but I mean, there's a degree where when she's talking to the camera and she's like, "Stop Halloween." Stop your neighbors from doing Halloween. It's like she is using the media to kind of rally the troops for what later will come later, right? I don't know if that's too far fetched of a reading, but I mean, it's kind of there, right? That like giving extremists the voice kind of causes,
and so there's two really scary moments in the movie, like genuinely kind of unsettling moments. And so the first one is the first instance of like on-camera violence, which we can talk about later if you want. But the second scary moment to me is it's kind of towards the end of the movie. Things have gone off the walls. There's maybe some sort of we don't know what's happened to some of the characters that stormed off, but we're never seen walking outside. And it seems like there's maybe someone running in the house. The door's locked that wasn't locked before. And they cut to the assistant out in the van who's the kind of backup broadcast. And she plays a pre-recorded segment that is super, leaning into the satanic panic. And that to me was maybe the most unsettling part of the whole movie. Like, it almost felt like I don't think that the violence that happens at the end with the anti-Halloween people, I don't think we ever see her in particular, but it feels like she's part of this kind of, maybe she's in on all of the violence that's going on all night.
Yeah.
It was so unsettling.
That little segment, right, where it just throws this, like, satanic panic, like, that you think Satanism isn't around the corners. Well, there's been an uptick of, like, animal sacrifices in our area stuff. It's Lovecraftian for just like 2 minutes. It like quickly is like, it's like, it's not gonna like lead too far into it, but it's kind of like, is there some like strange spiritual event taking place in this town, and we just are unaware of it, because they're just throwing it in this little segment, but like, okay, there's been this uptick of like satanic imagery everywhere,
and it's so the lo-fi-ness of this, I'd be interested if they talk about that in any of the commentary, but it's, I assume, not actually shot on VHS, but edited to look like a really degraded
I think some
VHS
of it
copy.
is.
But there's something about that.
But they ran it through three VHS tapes. They like scanned off a VHS tape and then put it through another, so that's why it looks like shit.
Oh. Wow. Huh.
Anyway, but yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, there's just something about, especially that this assistant newscaster that's delivering her, be scared of Satanists report, that she looks so uncanny too, with all of the lighting, the harsh lighting, and that how it's been run through this VHS filter so much that she kind of looks monstrous while she's delivering this, be scared report. I don't know. There's just something about that moment in particular that really. Was genuinely eerie to me, unsettling watching.
Yeah, I think the movie does, despite being really funny, also is kind of genuinely upsetting, especially if you try to get in the headspace of like, I'm just zoned out watching TV, and then my TV is suddenly showing what appears to be snuff content by the end, like there's something like just truly like, I don't know, unsettling as the stakes are rising. But so quickly, so that everyone kind of knows what happens, in the actual the actual chunk of plot,
chronologically
so they do this tour of the house, and they bring in, let's see, so the main guy, of course, Frank Stewart, is the like hosting the whole thing, and then they bring in a couple that seems roughly based off what's their name from The Conjuring, the
Warrens, the Ed and Lorraine Warren, yeah.
And so it seemed like loosely based off kind of that, so you have this like, psychic kind of couple that can kind of see what's going on, and they have their little doodads that can record the sound of ghosts, and all the shit that you do with a haunting house.
And their cat Shadow.
Yes.
that's more of a partner than just a pet. They emphasize multiple times, and Frank is really mocking about, of course.
Yes. Oh, it's just a great cat. Just a good cat appearance. Although if you're an animal lover, I don't know if you should watch it, because things don't end well for the
maybe
cat.
Not. Yeah, that would be the major. Content warning for the movie. Yeah,
I would say actually, this is the main thing I would say is, most of this movie is not that unsettling, but there is some animal cruelty, faked, but nevertheless, it's, I know that bothers people, so be aware of that.
Yeah. Well, that to me, that's the other scary moment of the movie, because that's the first time where there's some real, like, everything up to this point could be just a bad newscast that you would watch. Or if you ever watch, like, on YouTube, they have usually, embarrassing moments fail compilation of local news stuff. But I've watched, not stuff from the 80s, but I've watched a decent amount of that, and there's nothing up to that point that really is too out of the ordinary until the camera cuts after a commercial break, and you can tell everyone is distressed, everyone's immediately stressed out, and the camera kind of like cuts, just shows a little bit of cat violence, and then immediately pans away, and Frank is like, oh god, no, don't show
that.
It.
Like
it, like, like really, and to me that's just like, it's kind of like the Jaws effect, right? Like not showing it in
makes it
up
worse.
close and super detail is
it's
it feels more real. It feels like how you would really react to there being a mutilated cat
on
in front of you, you know?
Or like seeing it on TV specifically is you would be like, no way, are they going to show, oh my God, they're showing it. And then Frank, you know, kind of backs up your reaction of being like, no, to the cameraman, like, don't do that.
You know, they cut to the, you know, deliver an apology for the violent image you may have seen. And it all makes it feel like you said, how you would imagine a real life version of this to play out.
Yeah. For me, actually, the first moment that got me to jump is kind of silly because it's not really a big jump scary kind of thing, but it's the first protester that interrupts the proceedings. So like the very beginning when they're right outside the house. Yeah. The only reason is because up until this point, it feels like a very just warm, normal local TV segment. And then like, yeah, just some young guy out of nowhere just coming and grabbing Frank and screaming at him and then getting dragged off. It's like, oh, there's something going on here. You know, it kind of ruptures the illusion of this just being kind of like a nice small town thing up until this point, that there might be more going on. But yeah, so when they do the tour through the house, right, they go through, and then they brought it. I keep forgetting to mention, I think my favorite character actually, who is the priest. So
yeah, there's a lot there. Semiotically, there's a lot happening.
The priest is so funny. He just even though he barely says anything. But yeah, so Frankster brings out this priest that's part of their kind of the four of them, and he is just this completely mortified guy. Like until you find out who he really is at the very end, I think the impression you get is this is like, you know, like on year one of being a priest kind of priest is like, I think the initial impression that I get, like I got was just like, this guy he's just not been doing this very long.
Right. He drew the short straw at the parish. You know, the you get the impression at first you're saying that, oh, you know, that the experienced fathers are like, I'm not going to do this local news segment. You know, can you do it for, you know, I don't know. That's the other, you know, all of the movie is very Protestant except for the priest, you know, and he's kind of just that symbol of, you know, authenticity to any sort of, you know, demon spooky action, but you know, everything else feels much more, you know, kind of small town Midwest, you know, Protestant, not you know, East Coast old money Catholic.
Yeah, and of course the only Catholic you get is this priest who just kind of looks like a Midwest priest.
You know, he keeps getting pressured into, you know, the Frank is, and we're gonna do an exorcism live on air, and he's like, the priest is so uncomfortable. Like, well, technically, I guess I was trained. It's part of baptism and funerals and weddings, but to do an exorcism, but I really don't know if it's appropriate at this instance.
The Vatican.
Frank's like, but you're gonna do it.
The Vatican doesn't give me permission to do it. And Frank's just like, yeah, but you're gonna do it. So you get these four characters. They explore the house. They see some, I don't know, kind of spooky shit, and then they do the recording, the kind of classic recording thing, and then, you know, play it back, and then supposedly a demon is saying leave in it.
They do a live seance in the basement where, you know, people can call in and ask questions, but you know, no one
actually asks.
You get a bunch of people calling in with like Bart Simpson joke level, you know, call-ins.
So listening to the director's commentary, they didn't have any of the actors hear the calls that were going to play ahead of time, and then they also, even Chris didn't know which one was going to play. He got a collection of like 20 and then just a soundboard or something, and so he would just be like audio 12, and so no one would know what was about to play. So there's like a very like live reaction feel to all of it.
Yeah.
And then of course the seance is what gets broken up at the discovery of, I didn't even mention, their audio equipment suddenly gets destroyed, and then after the seance the cat gets destroyed.
Podcaster's nightmare. You know.
Yeah. This was an interesting thing. They were asking each other, because they all had different readings of their own movie on the commentary, and I want to ask you, so who do you think crushed the audio equipment?
You know, that's a good question. Because definitely the first before I guess you really know the ending, my assumption is that it's all being faked for the local news,
Yeah.
right? That the way that Frank tells them, he keeps the male of the Sands couple he keeps bringing up that his audio equipment was destroyed, and Frank is like, we'll handle it, we'll cover it, after the special. And to me, that feels like a bit tipping your hand of like, maybe they had some sort of production assistant breaking themselves, to add to the spookiness of it all.
Yeah, that's I guess by the
it's definitely possible that it's the protesters.
I kind of like it just took everything as it must have all been the protesters the whole time. But going back on it, and so like at least with most of the actors and the director, they all thought Frank did that. And then what their line was that Frank didn't kill the cat, though. That was when it shifts. Partially because they just liked the character too much and felt like that was a line. It's
like I said, that's kind of that intersection of, you talked earlier about kind of getting lulled into this sense of, I'm just watching the local news. I don't know, that just feels kind of like, for lack of a better term, the movie magic, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's that you're, like if you're playing a game, you're mentally fully giving yourself into the reality of this, that I'm watching an 80s news broadcast. And that's the first moment that kind of breaks your understanding of reality.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because up until that point, the crushed audio equipment, it's like, okay, the studio guys would do it. But then it's like, either everyone behind this program is a lot more fucked up than even they're letting on, or something else is happening here. Is like what changes, I think, with the death of the cat.
Right.
Yeah.
And well, that's one of the other unsettling recurring bits throughout the night is the way that what's going on in Frank's, the way the actor will switch from, this is a genuine reaction to unexpected things that I'm seeing, a mutilated cat body or maybe destroyed equipment. Maybe he was expecting that. I don't know. He's playing off of the unexpected dialogue between the other characters, and then he'll switch back into newscaster mode. Like we've been joking about with the way that the broadcast itself switches from into commercials and has the little pre-recorded, you are watching the WNUF Halloween Special, and he's able to do that all in himself, switch between genuine reaction and and also I'm a news broadcast person, and that's a lot of the comedy, but it becomes unsettling as the night goes on too.
Yeah, absolutely. Because he's maintaining it, and I think the reveal. So after the death of the cat, of course, our old couple leaves, and it's just the priest and Frank, and they go down into the basement to do an exorcism that he's insisting he will not do. And this whole final chunk is crazy. So priest does just the initial like crossing himself, and then they hear fucking insane noises upstairs immediately, and then find that the door is locked and they've been locked in the basement. And at this point, this is sorry. So why I wanted to keep going here is this is where you also see just how low Frank is going here, because he is getting locked in this basement. Something is clearly happening, and the priest is freaking the fuck out. And then he goes, "Okay, now is the moment that you need to do the exorcism." And he puts the microphone in front of the priest, and finally the priest admits that he was a hired actor that Frank did not tell he was going to do this to.
Folks, we are going where no camera crew has gone before. Father, perform the exorcism.
We're calling the police, Frank. Just break down the door and get out of there.
Perform the exorcism.
I am not a priest. I am
Shut
a
up.
fucking actor.
You shut the hell up.
Hired to do this.
You ungrateful shit.
Yeah, it just calls into, it kind of lets you know almost at the end, it's admitting that it's faked in a way that somehow makes it real, ironically. I don't know if you experienced that, but, by revealing, oh, this part was fake, it's like, but everything else that isn't, in a way that really, to me, kind of magnifies that that final gut punch there that you get when the after they, I guess the door opens. But
yeah, and so priest is weeping and pissing his pants, and so door opens. And what we see from some footage earlier, I think too, when they were first in the basement, is one of the camera people, I don't remember, get killed upstairs abruptly.
Yeah, they said it was an intern, I think, and he, like, unlike all of the professional cameramen, the whole time you can hear him breathing, and he clearly is not
cut out for
excited to go into the house.
Yeah, they're sending him in while Frank's locked downstairs to see who's locking the door. He clearly gets hit by an axe or something. It's very fast, and you also see the dead body of the one of the couple. So you're like, oh god, there's dead bodies upstairs. And this is when it like switches to being like, I don't know, like reasonably upsetting. Like if the movie was just at this level the whole time, it wouldn't be a fun movie. Like this is when it kind of is like suddenly really dark for a second.
And not only would it not be fun, but I think that it a lot of horror movies do try to at that level for too much of the movie, and it kind of pulls you out of it completely. You're like, okay, I'm watching a movie. I'm no longer buying into the magic of what's going on right here, because they're just at that level of intensity for so long. It's you can't maintain it, I don't think.
No, as this like it saves it and then brings it at the end, and so Frank and the camera folks, the door abruptly opens. They come up. They get hit by whoever has the axe. They die, or whatever. We don't know. Cameras go out, and there's the technical difficulties thing, which is held about like 30 seconds, and it's just kind of upsetting, like how long he lets it go. Like they were originally planning to just have it be like a solid 2 minutes, but they thought people would stop watching if they went too long. But it's just long enough.
Right, it's not a movie theater where they're waiting for the credits.
Yeah.
It's people. They knew people are watching this. Like probably a lot of people are watching pirated copies. Online. Like, oh, watch this fucked up movie.
Yeah.
They knew they had to keep you, I guess.
Oh,
Makes sense.
Oh, we skipped over another one of the things, actually one of the scenes that I find creepiest. And I don't remember when it exactly happens, but it's when one of the various upsetting things happens, and they don't know what to do with the cameras for a second. And so the producer quickly just throws on one of the news segments earlier. And for some reason, it's the dentist buyback program again. Seeing it a second time is incredibly upsetting, because the reason it's just playing is to fill dead air. And so it's just like really unsettling and uncanny the whole time because of that. You've seen the segment before, and it's only there because there's something heinous happening.
Kuleshov only theorized such a cinematic technique.
That's right.
But you could show the same footage, and one time it'd be annoying and maybe a little funny, and the other time be
incredibly
fully
upsetting.
dreadful based off the context. That's
Yeah, we get to the final act of the movie here, where it comes back from the technical difficulties, and now whoever is murdering everybody has gotten a hold of the camera, and you can see the bodies of the priest, the old elderly couple, and Frank is still alive, and they, pretty vividly on camera cut off his tongue. And you also see one of the whoever's holding the camera accidentally flashes the person, like shows the person next to him before she yells at him, "Don't film me," who is, of course, the protester we saw from the beginning, who is organizing Harvest, the anti-Halloween thing. So that's who did it. It's the fundies.
Yeah. Do you think? I wonder. When I was watching it, if this is the one moment where I wonder if like a little they go a little too far, if not too far content wise, but I wonder if a little bit more of an ambiguous kind of like if they cut this segment where they show all the dead bodies and they show who the killer is. I wonder if they had just cut to the final scene of the movie, It might have been a little bit more interesting, just ambiguously, but discursively, it is kind of fun to get, yes, it was the fundamentalists, the Halloween is satanic, ignoring Hallows Eve again, but so I don't know. I'm kind of that's the one part of the movie that I'm not 100% on, but everything else I stand by is good.
I think I like it because I think there still is some ambiguity. I think like you can either have a basic reading of some crazy fundamentalists killed the guy who was on TV because he was advertising Halloween, or there's still that kind of weird Lovecraftian undertone to it all because of the previous segment about the animal sacrifices in town. And also, clearly everyone seemed to believe there was a malevolent spirit in the house. Like, all the psychics and all that. And so there's an element where, and like, it never explains like where the recording of Leave comes from or anything like that. So,
right. Like how much was faked, if anything,
Yeah. So
we know some level of fakery is occurring, but there's an ambiguity as to how much. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that I think is what helps me kind of forgive the kind of too much closure at the end, I think, is because I still don't think we have the full picture. And I like that because I like it really feeling like something crazy was going on this night. And we have no clue what was going on in this town. And then quickly we get the epilogue where it's the next day of the news, or actually it's been 5 days. And the newscasters from the beginning are saying, we still don't know what the hell that was.
Well, then you get the final gut punch of the other newscaster, coming up, our Christmas special.
That's so good.
Just like, please, if you're out there, let us know, what happened with this mystery 5 days ago. Their bodies have not been recovered. And also Christmas. It's time to do your shopping.
It's so good.
That final punch is great.
It's so fantastic. I really like this movie. And, now that we've kind of like gone through the plot here more, one of the questions I kind of threw at you, when we decided to do this movie was like, what makes a good found footage movie, which we kind of talked a little bit about at the beginning, because I think this is an example you and I would both agree is like, this is a good found footage movie. But I also think you and I have watched a lot of
a cut above the rest.
I've watched a lot of shitty found footage movies too, I'm assuming.
Yes. Several this month already, but
well, I don't remember if we were recording or not, but you were talking about, trying to watch a horror movie every day this month. And, because of that, defaulting oftentimes to the shortest one. So that when you do that, unless you're watching, like finding like a golden spot of like, 80s exploitation movies, maybe would be the short. But aside from like maybe that, if you're wanting like that 70 to 80 minute spot, it's going to be a shitty found footage movie from like some dropout of the Mumblecore movement or some. That's most of those.
I don't think, I don't think I can convince my fiance to watch like a 50-minute experimental YouTube horror movie. But, if I ever get there, that would save so much free time.
I think like one of the biggest things for how to do it right is like you mentioned with Blair Witch, them kind of like you're spending several months disappearing, to kind of, give this allure to it all. And this movie as well, like, I think it's a respect for the medium because found footage movies are about the medium. Like, that's primarily what they're doing.
Yes.
Like, have you ever seen Man Bites Dog, which is not technically a found footage movie?
No, I have not.
But it's okay. Oh man, I that would be fun to do another episode of Fruitless at some point about. Okay, so it's this French movie that is a documentary crew. It's like from the 90s or so, documentary crew following a serial killer.
Oh, okay.
And it's like,
but it's like real.
It's it's a fake, like it's a predecessor to found footage in a lot of ways, I think.
Okay.
But it's plays in like a weird line between kind of being a horror movie and kind of getting lumped as like an art house or a shocking art house movie. I will warn you guys, like pretty upsetting if you are, one of those movies I'm recommending for if you are someone who likes upsetting movies, not Not just random people, but one of the big things.
And what's that one famous one from the 80s where they
Cannibal Holocaust.
They did like the Cannibal Holocaust,
which
yes.
also
it's
the cast also went
vein.
missing. They had to drag him in front of court because they got sued for killing the actors. And they had to be like, no, we didn't actually kill the actors.
No,
we
did kill some animals on screen.
We did actually kill a lot of animals.
Yeah, I think you can also tie it to kind of like a long perspective. A lot of horror literature will have that kind of found document element to it, right? Dracula is an epistolary novel, right? It's all just, you don't ever actually get any perspective from Dracula himself. It's all just letters and diary entries and kind of assembled together to form a narrative.
Frankenstein,
a lot of the
Frankenstein, I think, has some of that too. Yeah,
and like a lot of the Lovecraftian fiction, that kind of we've mentioned tonight, and the predecessors like it was M.R. James, King in Yellow. A lot of it will have that kind of like, I found this document on an expedition to the Orient, popular at the time, that there's something to, hey, this horrors will really get you if you think it's real, even when it's absurd, it clearly, like so much of that, like you get even in more recently, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre famously begins with the voiceover and on-screen text. This is a real incident tragedy that happened to these poor Texans. There's something about telling people that something is based on a real event or is actually a real work of horror fiction that you found that makes people more willing to play along. More willing to scare themselves.
Yeah, because because if this actually happened, it is upsetting. Like that is kind of, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
But and so I think because of that, like that focus on authenticity, it's always going to be found footage as a genre is always going to be about the medium. And so like because of that, like there's things where like if something feels like it's not maybe historically accurate to when this movie is supposedly set, I think that's normally a dumb thing to obsess over, except for with a found footage movie. I think that's what it actually really matters.
Yeah, you can get a lot of like the because VHS was so widely spread of a medium, the first time it was accessible for people to have cameras at home, right? So a lot of the found footage aesthetics are usually based off that kind of VHS
home video feel,
scratchy, whatever, home video, bad footage. But I think a lot of it then naturally is set kind of in the past. But you end up with that kind of I love the 80s approach to things where it's not. One of the things that WNUF does, I think, because as you mentioned, the director watched so much actual news footage from the time, is it doesn't feel like what we remember the 80s to be like. It feels like what the 80s actually was like.
Everything's like kind of ugly and abrasive, and
it's not, it's not like I grew up watching Spielberg movies, and that's what I think the 80s is,
Right, absolutely. But yeah, and I think, because of it has to, I think, like play with the medium, like I was saying. So the reason I brought up Man Bites Dog is like there's these scenes like where at one point the boom mic guy walks off away from the camera, and you just hear like footsteps and you don't know where they're coming from, and it's because the boom mic guy is like down 3 floors. And so like somebody's talking to the camera, but you can't hear them, but you can hear the loud sound of someone walking upstairs, and then you see the boom mic show up behind him. And it just makes you constantly think about the process of this being a thing getting recorded by people. And that's also why I appreciated like the fast forwarding chunks of WNUF, because it feels very like it draws your attention to this as like a videotape, like as a medium. And a lot of ones that are really bad, I think part of it is that they don't behave like the actual medium. So like part of it is like, well, why are they even recording this thing at this point anymore in the first place? But then also sometimes it's like one of my biggest pet peeves with a lot of found footage movies is when it like looks like it's getting distorted because of the spiritual presence of some demonic
Yeah.
entity, and it doesn't look like what actual footage getting distorted looks like, which I know sounds pedantic.
Or when they're running, they'll always do the thing where it's running and it cuts between like 2 frames of a shot.
Yeah.
In a way that, that's not,
It's not what this would look like, and I know that sounds pedantic, but with found footage, that's the point. It needs to look authentic like that, you know?
See, here's a hot take. I know that you're a fan of this. I don't know, mode of filmmaking, history of filmmaking. So is found footage the Dogma 95 of horror movies?
Yes and no.
I mean, I know they had like an explicit rule, like no genre films,
Yeah.
no murder. So it can't be.
can't-
It doesn't fit the rules by definition. But there's something too that kind of like, all right, the actors and directors become anonymous because it's supposed to be found footage, real recordings of actual people. That I think you kind of get that a little bit with that one of the dogmas about not attaching the director's name to the credits, so I wonder,
which I mean,
the not using
that does happen when this movie.
only diegetic music, all that kind of stuff. There's some overlap.
I think that's there. I think the only difference is that Dogma 95 doesn't necessarily make you think like okay, the person holding the camera, you're aware of that in Dogma 95 because it's trying to make you think of the artifice of movies. With found footage, it's more like diegetic that somebody's holding the camera. You know what I mean? So it's not making you
right.
Yeah,
right.
like usually the camera is being held and you know who's holding it. You're more aware of the subjectivity of it. As with Dogma, it's more like, the reason the camera is like the shaky, shitty camcorder or something, and that you can maybe see one of the cameramen in the reflection or whatever, is because it's trying to make you go like, remember, this is just like actors, and this is just, it's Brechtian, right?
It's almost the opposite effect then.
Yeah, that's fair.
Where found footage is trying to immerse you in this, then Dogma 95 is, don't forget, this is a product. This was made by human hands and human labor.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because found footage is about like kind of the magic trick of being able to kind of buy the idea that this was just on a tape that I found at a thrift store or something, but it's actually something fucked up, or this is the recording that we found of this dead camera crew out in the woods, like with Blair Witch or whatever. Yeah.
Right. Or, I think a potentially underexplored mode of found footage is the internet, the violence that we see on the internet all the time, right? Like real life, snuff films that get posted on, social media. Anytime one's going around on TikTok, all the schools will get, what you should know about your teenager and their phones, and it'll be just some legitimately awful real life violence that is getting spread over the phones that are so much a part of our lives. It's interesting to me. I think that hasn't been as far as I'm aware as explored when it comes to found footage, but that's usually 15 seconds of a video or just a still image of a picture versus a 90-minute movie is a little harder to maybe sustain that.
I would say like I'm sure there's stuff that I think plays into the fear of snuff films, but not no, I don't think it's quite there's not a lot of modern stuff, I would say, that plays into that fear of like, oh my God, is this actually going to be a real person dying? Because like for me, snuff films is something I've done a very good job avoiding that content as much as I can. I've avoided I have not fallen for many of the like shock things, that kind of I don't know. Part of that's a conscious thing because I think it genuinely disturbs me in a way some other stuff doesn't, and I think that's
yes.
And so if you can simulate that sense of being disturbed though, without it being actually real, that's what the feat of found footage at its best is that like, oh my God, is this real? And that's, that's kind of like, I
Yeah.
don't know, that's what I think attracts people to seeing awful shit like that oftentimes, is just that like unsettling feeling of both, is this real, but also why did it get filmed and why is it getting distributed? Those are, I think, the scary questions kind of built into a violent image like that.
Well, yeah, that to me, then, you talked about found footage is inherently about the medium. And I think part of that then is that it's also about the form that you're watching this found footage in, right? Like I had mentioned way back at the beginning, if you found VHS of this in the wild,
It'd be really scary, actually.
Plopped it in. Yeah. You would watch the movie differently, but or even if someone like sent you a link to a sketchy looking website and is like, yo, look at this, this crazy footage that was found from the 80s and somebody uploaded online, like that would change how you view it versus I'm putting in a Blu-ray or I'm selecting this on a streaming app. That changes how you view it, or even going to see in a movie theater. All of these, the same content affects us differently in all these different ways that we can watch it. And I think that's another thing that found footage can make us think about. As artistically, what is the effect of how I'm viewing this have on me?
Yeah, I think that's it. Is because it draws attention to that kind of it draws attention, to the medium and the mode of consuming it and all that in a way that a lot of other styles don't, because found footage is all about that. Like, if you want to do a good found footage movie, you have to deal with like, okay, how would somebody be finding this? That's like, I think the first question you're asking yourself, like, yeah, like, like where it if you wanted to make a found footage movie that was like, say, a YouTube short film, you would think of it as like, well, what's kind of the unsettling thing somebody could stumble across on YouTube at like 2 a.m., because that's the kind of context you want to be kind of invoking.
Yeah. And, I think that what you said there of how did somebody find this and what was their thinking behind how they edited it all together? I think that's where a lot of found footage movies just really miss the mark of what they could potentially be. Even movies that I think are genuinely pretty good, like entertaining pieces of media. Well, they don't consider a lot of those things when they're making a found footage project. It's kind of just a cheap, easy way to not have to have an expensive camera rig or hire professional actors. You just get to shoot it handheld and with my buddies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's one of my I didn't take a lot, but I remember taking as an elective one film course in college, and one of the rules the professor had was if you can't make it good, make it funny. And I think that's a lot of the found footage that I watch that is good but doesn't necessarily like live up to the high standards of what feeling like an actual piece of found media. It's because it's entertaining, it's funny. It's like it's like Deadstream was an example of that, where it's like, okay, the effects are cheesy and goofy, and it doesn't actually, I don't ever actually think that this is a real haunting, but it's funny. So.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you brought up Deadstream, because I think of like, even though I wouldn't call it like an amazing found footage movie, like I think I gave it like 3 stars. I don't know on Letterboxd, but
it's like that was entertaining.
I think I gave it more than that, because I think that one is a bit underrated, because although you have to get back. Okay, yes, it's a found footage of a Twitch stream, right, and like that's one of those things that is not promising when you hear. But I think it delivers on that pretty well.
He immediately lives up to like what you think. He's immediately like, yeah, I'm a Twitch streamer. Here's all the things I've been canceled for.
I think it's because the character is it's funny, like you mentioned, and the character is engaging enough, and I also think the story probably couldn't be told outside of the Twitch thing, because multiple times it's like it's a pretty good joke in it consistently, is like things getting answered about what's going on, because like some 12-year-old asked their grandma who's like watching the stream, and then they send in a video, and so right. I don't know, there's a degree where it's like, I don't know if this story, like this, it does change the way the story is being told because it's being told through this.
The joke I think about all the time from that movie is when he's answering user comments on there, and someone says like, "Were you bullied for they didn't call you Crater Face in high school?" And he said, "No, because I still had acne back then." That's a perfect joke. I love. It's just...
This is okay. In contrast to, have you ever seen Deadware? It was in 2021.
Oh no, I don't think I've seen that one.
This is one of the ones that pissed me off and made me start thinking about what makes me really hate certain found footage movies. So it's another one kind of like Deadstream where it's set on a computer and it's supposed to be like a screen recording. You know, we saw a bunch of these kind of rise up in like the mid 2010s, I think, with like Unfriended. Some of those,
right? And I think there was probably 3 or 4 that came about directly because of COVID.
Which actually Deadware does that. So, but the thing is, Deadware is supposed to be set in 1999, but they're doing a video call on a computer, and they make it look like a cheap old computer, but also like it doesn't. I know.
It'd have to be, like 50p, for it to be accurate and still lagging for it to be accurate.
They're still dropping like the modern slang throughout it too. Like there's no, it doesn't. And so why it pissed me off is because I felt like initially I was being pedantic a little bit, where I'm like, I don't know. I watched the fun genre movie and I'm mad that it's not historically accurate.
Right. You don't want to be the CinemaSins like ding guy. That's the worst guy,
Yeah. But like, because of it being found footage, it needs to be about the medium, and this medium could not take place. None of this makes sense, And then you have, you're supposed to have supposedly have people in 1999 saying, "Oh, my friend totally ghosted me." Are you fucking with me? No. Why not just set it in the present? Why do this?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I think a lot of why are you making this a period piece? It's a question that more people probably should ask, other than just like I like the aesthetic of that era. And I think like WNUF does a good job of especially through all of the commercials, you really get a sense of like what are the neuroses of 80s America. You really get a full picture of just all the everything.
Absolutely. It definitely answers the question, why is this set in this period? So like I haven't seen any of the sequels of this, but this is also an issue with VHS. I've seen all of them, so we can I can go into it. I don't like them, but I've seen some of them I like, but I've heard they get better, but that first one is the only one I saw.
I think the first one's the worst. There's like one good segment in the first one.
Part of it is there is no goddamn reason this needs to be technically set in the 90s, right? Like, I don't think that ever pays off except for, I think, once where somebody at a Halloween party is wearing a Unabomber costume. And I'm like, okay, all right. Now I see this, I guess, the 90s, it makes more sense that he's doing that. But like, on the whole, there's no reason that this is set at this time. It doesn't like really have any impacts. And then also, I think it's really unclear what you're watching throughout it. Like, because there's supposed to be that framing device, and the framing device just does not work. There's no sense of
they dropped the framing device after like the third one, much to I think its benefit. It's just
Yeah, it's really really rough.
And the other thing that those movies have, that the CGI is always, I mean, one, it's not good CGI, but it always is distracting. It's this is what Blair Witch famously. You don't see the witch, right? There's nothing that ever like breaks that. Like this couldn't actually happen. There's no bad CGI witch that pops out and is trying to get a jump scare on you. I don't know. In WNUF, the violence is all practical. There's no CGI monstrosities that that takes you out every single VHS segment. So the ones that work better for me are at least kind of operating on a level of unreality already, or they're not going for a found footage effect. They're just going for a a VHS kind of effect, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah. I think the found footage aspect of VHS is the worst aspect because most of them would be better as not found footage movies, like as just a regular old horror short film. Like you can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know, just like looking at the directors on VHS too, it's like I don't know, like I feel like Ty West, who I like, feels like he's really phoning it in on VHS. And
I'm a Ty West hater. And his segment on the first VHS I think is the worst one. He directed the one that Joe Swanberg is acting in, where it's the couple on vacation, it's just kind of like they're goofing around for the first 2/3 of the movie, and then hard cut, they kill Joe Swanberg, and it's like, oh, okay, I guess in retrospect there was a story there, but in the moment it didn't feel like anything was happening.
It's a bit of a I think part of why that doesn't work is Joe Swanberg, who I don't know if I've talked about on Fruitless, is like my sworn enemy. Like I fucking hate Joe Swanberg. And I like Ty West, but I really wish he'd stop hanging out with Joe Swanberg.
Do you know like any of the Joe Swanberg, real life lore? I don't know if lore is the right word there, but have you heard of any of the...
I know like a bit, but I went through a kick where I tried to watch a bunch of Mumblecore movies this year, and I saw a lot of great movies and a lot of, like, there are a handful of great movies. There's a lot of trash in that genre, and most of that trash was made by Joe Swanberg, who also finds a way to whip out his dick a lot in movies, and I'm resentful.
Wow.
I am resentful of that. In the movie Kissing on the Mouth, he jerks off to completion on camera, and I've seen that, and I wish I could unsee that. So I'm resentful of it.
Speaking of avoiding snuff films, man. Again, this could be cut for time, but so Fantastic Fest, like the film festival they have in Austin. Alamo Drafthouse puts it on. They used to, I don't know if they still do, but they used to have, I don't know what they would call it, but they would have these debates about a topic, that then after they do the, verbal debates, they would box. And Joe Swanberg was in one of these debates boxing against, prepare yourself for this, Devin Faraci, famously canceled Devin Faraci, debating the merits of found footage and the Mumblecore, and then they debated and then punched each other, and that's one of those like Alien versus Predator, whoever wins we lose kind of events.
It would be fun to watch Joe Swanberg get punched in the face, though, so maybe I will watch that. No, yeah, I just I think he represents everything that's wrong with Mumblecore, which is narcissistic people without much to say that are using this sort of facade of being deep to force you to watch them either metaphorically or literally jack off. And what I mean by that is just like, it's just constantly him doing stuff for his own pleasure in front of the camera and being like, isn't this deep? And it's even later in life, his supposedly good one, which is mid, Drinking Buddies, is also him just hiring a bunch of celebrity friends to hang out with him for a weekend. It's like the rich person's version of the cheap jerking off on camera, to me, where it's just...
Yeah, it is interesting that these guys are, that there's that does feel like, what if I watched a found footage movie that there was no horror in? Or I guess the horror is all, social. It's all I'm listening to these vapid, rich, usually white people have conversations about their tragic sex lives for an hour and a half, and it's like, if I want that, I can just read David Foster Wallace. What do I need Joe Swanberg for?
Right. I think talking about Mumblecore though does kind of match like I think fit with found footage, because I think there was kind of a shift of like mumblecore people to fuck with found footage because it was the natural kind of extension if you wanted to start making genre films. Because like Mark Duplass stars in the Creep movies, which I don't know how you feel about them, but I actually do like those. I know that's a
they're better.
Yeah. I think mostly just because the character in them is entertaining, and that makes it it may be entertaining.
There's something. Yeah, I don't know. There was. It's now I'm thinking about it. So you get the found footage genre, you get mumblecore, and you also kind of get the mockumentary style of sitcom all simultaneously. I wonder. That's an interesting thing to think about.
What's
going on in our psyches that we want.
Yeah. To be...
we want this kind of like faux realism in our fiction. We need, so much so that like the mockumentaries are so funny on sitcoms. You start off with like The Office, where it's there's actually characters that are the camera crew that are filming this, and by the end you end up with Modern Family that it's they just do cutaway gags because that makes it easy to deliver punchlines. So, I guess so. There's no realism to the documentary in Modern Family or Parks and Rec, but
it just has that like handheld look to it. But you're not thinking about like who this camera crew supposedly is or anything. Like in Modern Family, it's like I don't know. it's the Dogma 95 sitcom. I don't stand by that at all. But I think that's a funny sentence. No,
it's George Bush's fault. This is another thing we can add on his sins.
I think so.
He gave us Joe Swanberg.
I think that the turn to the mockumentary style to a sitcom, I think that does all kind of fit. Yeah, there is this turn to like, the maybe the hyper real might be the like fun philosophical way of framing that, right? Because it's like you still know the illusions there, but it's like I don't know. Well, actually, the hyper real is like when it gets to like Modern Family or whatever, where it's imitating imitations of reality so much that it's just kind of its own thing now. It's just kind of become its own.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you get kind of in Succession a little bit, that Adam McKay influence on that style. I don't think he ever did a mockumentary proper, but, that heavy improvisational style and, handheld camera so you can do like rapid, pan whip zooms, to emphasize the facial acting that's going on. I think that does kind of all come from this same, like you're saying, desire to escape the artifice. I don't know. We don't have Hollywood musicals anymore. That's asking too much of the believer, the audience to buy into to believe it.
Yeah,
there's just something there.
Well, and I think what's actually kind of frustrating about that shift is because that shift has happened throughout the history of cinema a lot, right? The like move toward like realism, and generally that tug is often like left-wing movements trying to be like so like think of like the Italian neorealists, right? They're like, look, this is war-torn Italy, this is war-torn Germany, this is this kind of like we're showing you reality rather than what's like the cutesy shit on TV. Like this is the actual destroyed buildings, and that's kind of a burst of that. And then you have like Dogma 95 in like the 90s, kind of has that same aesthetic.
Altman before that a little bit, the dialogue talking over each other. Yeah.
And then like in the Soviet Union, you had like the Czech New Wave and the Yugoslav Black Wave, like both had that same like, or actually the Budapest School in Hungary all have these like documentary looks. They want to kind of have that handheld camera look of realism, usually to highlight the living conditions of people in the countries. And especially with like Soviet countries, it was more, Soviet movements, it was more about like, pushing back against socialist realism, against like the kind of facade of like, oh, everything's great here. It's like, well, it actually sucks. And here's a movie about like, a mom who's like forced to live with like her 10 kids because there's no housing in Hungary or something like that. Like that's
that style that found its peak, arguably, with The Wire, right?
Yeah, right.
There's a little joking there, but that is that same
Sure,
impulse
yeah.
of the docudrama. That was the big when it was coming out, that they were selling you on, like it was filmed like a documentary, and you look at how messed up Baltimore actually is, but on the point of hyperreality, I don't know if you know, there's a lot of the he used a lot of real police as kind of some of the supporting characters in the show. Real Baltimore people. You can tell who's doing the Baltimore accent and who's actually from Baltimore a little bit. But there's this one bit, spoilers for I think season 4 of The Wire, where everyone's favorite, totally real character Omar, jumps out of a building window and is able to still limp away injured. And at the time, there were all these people that were like, "Man, this is so unrealistic. Like, how could he survive such a thing?" And David Simon's like, "All right, here's the news article that I wrote of a real I did this, and it was 8 stories, but we had to make it more realistic for the fictional telling, so that you would believe that it was real." There's an interesting to tie it to that hyper realism that you have to make the fiction more real than reality for us to buy into it almost.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I think that there's probably something to that, being kind of a thing coming out of I don't know, the 90s onward, I think, in general, in our media. But what I was gonna say with all the various movements in the past that have done this versus, say, a lot of found footage movies, a lot of Mumblecore, stuff like that, is that turn to we're gonna really emphasize the real here, is not usually getting employed for the same goal now that it was in those previous moments. It's not it's not social realism, it's not look at the, some of the Mumblecore movies get closer to that with the I get the feeling of the guy who's graduated from college and can't find a fucking job. Some of that starts kind of drifting a little bit into okay, this is how real life is under the, material circumstances of, mid 2000s capitalism or whatever. But on the whole, it's mostly just using it for narcissistic ends, or with a lot of found footage movies, it's just not, I don't know, it's not doing anything with that realism. It's the kind of documentary style kind of stuff. I don't know.
I wonder too if there's something about just the different ways that we have post the internet, approach different filmic mediums, that has kind of made it so that I don't know, that it's that's why so much of this, part of why, in addition to just liking that VHS aesthetic, a lot of these movies jump back to the 80s and 90s, is this that there also is a sense of that was before the end of history, right? I don't know, there's something there about that the found footage in the present is all there's it's not a lot that can be, the fact that the footage had to be found implies a disaster, right? It implies that if I just uploaded it myself, it wouldn't be found footage. It'd be, man, I experienced this crazy thing. Go look at it. No. So that there's a hopelessness to a lot of found footage movies that maybe kind of comes from that end of history turn. There's no disasters already happened before the movie even started, because it's found footage. The disaster happened before we were born, even.
Yeah, and so all we have is, I don't know, the ability to reflect on the past or whatever. And, this might be something that would be a way of moving forward with it as a genre, would be trying to add more of that editorial voice that we kind of gestured at with WNUF having the fast forwarding. I don't know how to do it right, but something like that, where it has the intrusion of the present on it. I think one of the ways of doing that is, and this drifts whether these even count as found footage anymore, but the more documentary style stuff. I think that you and I disagree on this though, based off Letterboxd, but Lake Mungo is an example of this to me, but which I really liked.
It's entirely possible I was just too tired when I'm watching that. That's the thing we always have to admit with our reviews. I watched that in bed. I might have been tired. I might have just thought like, this is boring because I'm falling asleep. But
and my girlfriend had the same reaction to it though. So it's like, I think it's either it gets you or it doesn't, that movie. A more recent one though is, which I think takes Lake Mungo and makes it better actually, is Savageland, which Jack will
check that one out.
Yeah, I think partially because it's got a racial element to it. So it's a documentary about like a whole town in Texas near the border gets just completely massacred, and the one guy who survives is just a single Mexican guy who took a bunch of pictures. And the whole town uses the pictures to blame him for this thing that, as the pictures are getting developed, he clearly did not do, and something else happened. It's got a little more of that bite of that. I don't know that, but it introduces a editorial voice, a narration or something to it that I think is maybe necessary. Of like, we're reflecting on these objects from the past, but there's something new being introduced to it. And there's like a radical tradition of that too, with like Peter Watkins films from the 60s and 70s in Britain, where these like, fake documentaries, but they were from a distinctly like radical perspective. So it's there. It's there. Yeah,
I wonder too, this isn't found footage, but I wonder if so there's something that is more intentional with how it breaks the reality of a found footage movie. Maybe could be used to good effect. Like I'm thinking of like Michael Haneke's Funny Games. Like if there was if there was something like that where it's the editor of this found footage film like going into the edit and making changing the story with intentionality. I think you could do something interesting with that might progress the genre a little bit. Just I don't know, messing with the narrative that yours doesn't do, but Dogma 95 does, where you're like, it making you think, reminding you you're watching an edited product, and making you question like who is doing the editing here, who is telling the stories that we receive in society. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to kind of go forward. And actually, I kind of I like that. I like the use of that specific way of framing it too, is it making you question who's telling you this story. It almost makes it, I don't know, like you're engaging with this collaboratory, like the audience is kind of part of this interpretive process of what's going on and being aware of like who's telling them the story. That's, mentioning Peter Watkins, that was like his whole philosophy, was like trying to really draw attention to the artifice of like the medium of television that just kind of delivers you information. And so he'd like set these documentaries that would be about like, wars that there was not a camera crew at, in like medieval war, and then it's like got a documentary camera crew there, and he's trying to just draw your attention to the artifice of it all. And I think that's, I don't know, there's some lessons to that I think if you wanted to make a good like political found footage film, I think that would be, or even if it's not intentionally political, but just like taking the genre and kind of fucking with it, I think that would be how you do it.
Don't doesn't let you it kind of makes the genre a bit more like a campfire story too, in that sense. Like like that's one of the things that I personally have never enjoyed about reading like creepypasta online, is that it's not there's no relationship that I have between me and the author on the internet, versus that same story told by it's like, okay, someone saying this happened to me, or oh, this happened to a buddy of mine, like at a campfire tall tale spooky story session, that is what makes the story work. And for me, in a certain sense, is that it's okay, this is I'm buying into the reality of this is my friend telling me the story, and not a stranger online.
And
then so maybe building up that like this is a this is someone coming together and editing this footage in a specific way to tell a specific story, but letting you know that that I'm telling this story. I don't know.
Yeah.
That might change how we view it a little bit. If the director comes on like, "Hi, my name is so and so, and I have a little found footage project for you."
That's I think that's a good maybe a good place to start wrapping up here. But yeah, like the introduction of kind of an editorial or authorial voice into found footage is, I think, something that would help it move past its end of history slump that we've kind of described here, I think. Yeah. Well, I know, Steven, you have some stuff you wanted to plug before we wrap up here. You have some projects going on right now, so why don't you tell everyone about that?
Yeah, so hopefully this will be live by the time that the episode drops, but I'm starting a comic book, I don't know what you call it, analysis blog. It's at spikestonehand.com, and the way that I would frame it is that comic books, to me, what makes them so powerful is that, unlike a film, a comic book is just lines, right? At the end of the day, it's just lines and colors drawn on a paper, but in such a way that it tricks our brains into thinking that there's real people and real characters and real story happening. And you can generate this sympathy from, again, just lines and sometimes colors. And to me, that's magic. That's the magic of comic books. So the idea being it's just a blog where I go through comic books I like and try to explain, okay, what is the artist and the artistic team doing here in order to get you to buy in? So some of it is kind of similar to film theory. Some of it's, comic book theory. It's really a kind of underdeveloped field a little bit. There's only a few key works in that, but so trying to advance that field a little bit of what makes a comic book work, So it's at spikestonehand.com. That'll be the site, and I'll probably include just other hey, here's some comic book recommendations. Less work on my end to just say this is good, than try to explain why I think it's good. So, when I'm lacking for content, that's the barrel I'll be digging.
Hell yeah! Well, I'm excited to see what you do with that. So yeah, that's coming soon. I will stick the link to that in the show notes for people who are interested. And I think with that, I will say thank you, everybody, for listening to Fruitless, and thank you, Steven, for joining me this evening. This was fun.
Yeah, thanks. Time to go sleep.
Yeah.
This late night conversation.
Thank you so much for listening to Fruitless, a podcast brought to you by our lovely patrons, who include Chris Barker, Leo Dickinson, James R., Thomas C., Kyle Gannis, Moss, The Worst of All Possible Worlds, and Elizabeth Power. Thank you so much to everybody who supports the show. And if you want to join the list of names at the end of episodes, you can do that by joining our Patreon, which is in the show notes. If you like what you heard today, consider subscribing and maybe leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, which helps us in the algorithm and all that. Don't forget to check out Spike Stonehand's new comics blog, Divining Comics, in the show notes at spikestonehand.com. And just follow everyone involved with the show all the time on social media. Thank you so much for listening, and you have a good day.